morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida. It's Saturday, my friend, and we're talking with Clifton Taylor, and you are listening to Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. And welcome to episode 149. Today we have a very special guest for you, lighting designer and author of the critically acclaimed new book, Color and Light, Clifton Taylor. Welcome, Clifton, and good morning.
So good to be here. Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Steve is currently at technical rehearsals, so Stan and I will be performing a Lumen Duo today. And before we get started, Stan, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Clifton's career?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the abbreviated bio here, but it's pretty good. So for over 34 years, Clifton Taylor has been creating lighting, projection, and scenic designs for theater, dance, and opera companies all around the world. His work has been commissioned on Broadway, off-Broadway, regionally, and in 17 countries outside the United States. This year, Clifton joined the faculty at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, having had prior experience lecturing at NYU, the New York Choreographic Institute, and annually at LDI with his Cliff Talk series. He's also had academic appointments at the Juilliard School, the University of Iowa, the Royal University of Fine Arts in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. This coming year, he will be designing at Royce Hall at UCLA. In fact, this coming week, the Juilliard School, Dallas Theater Center, the Japan Society in New York, and the Royal Ballet at Covent Garden. The Rose Theater at Lincoln Center. He will design the scenery and lighting for new opera productions in Trento, Italy, Barcelona, Spain, and Tokyo, Japan. Clifton is also the author of Color and Light, Navigating Color Mixing in the Midst of the LED Revolution, available on Amazon and directly from the publisher at SilmanJamesPress.com. And in his free time, he pursues an alternate life as a fine art painter of portraits and landscapes, which I am particularly fond of, I must say. So welcome to the show, Clifton.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
And Stan, instead of just saying you're fond of it, buy a damn piece of art. Okay?
Yes, everyone should buy art. Buy art from living artists. Yeah.
I didn't know he had them for sale, or I would.
Every artist sells their paintings. Come on.
Tell me then wait till they die, because then they're worth more.
Not to them.
Did you hear about that painting yesterday in the New York Times at the Met that the Met bought, but there's a whole story behind the dealer and how his house was taken by the Nazis and the painting, they didn't know where it went. These are fascinating mysteries.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Like 75 years later, we're still sorting out the ruins of the Nazi regime. It's amazing to me.
It is.
That is. That's really kind of bizarre.
It's how sweeping and systemic it was.
Yeah.
Yes. So Clifton, you're going to be in town next week, and are you going to call me for lunch?
Yes, I would love to.
I'm really tired of our guests like flying in and out of LA and not even thinking about me. It's making me feel very small.
I would love to have lunch. That would be great.
He's a fun lunch. I can attest to that.
And I'll even pay for it, Clifton.
Oh, awesome. Even better.
Okay. So anyway, let's get started. First of all, I got another question to ask. I'm immediately going to go right off the track here because...
You're going off script, David?
I'm going off script because actually my first question is why a book on color? And you're talking about the LED revolution. But what do you think about this new laser fixture from Clay Packey called the Xtylos?
You know, I saw it on the floor. I think it's beautiful. It's part of our continuing work to make lights brighter and brighter. Mm-hmm. And I think that the brighter we can make lights, the better. I'm a big proponent of bright lights. So
me too.
I'm not one of these people who thinks lighting is too bright. I think the more the better. So I'm constantly telling my kids that full is a good level. So
that's right.
I mean, same here. Can I take a left turn on that, David? That point about the Xtylos and the brightness that Clifton's talking about, because I was thinking about a question that I wanted to ask Clifton that's not in the script, also. But because you and I have a love affair with color, and we'd like to study it and understand it, but there's this link between illuminance, between brightness and color. And sometimes you can get the same result, not by sort of shifting the color of the source, but by just increasing intensity. And my understanding is that luminance and color perception are separate systems, yet I've had better results sometimes by not getting a higher CRI level or a TM30 level, but actually by getting a higher luminance level in terms of the way the colors are rendered or played to the observer. What do you think?
Yeah, so I know this a lot from painting, but I know this in my lighting work as well. But if you ever open the stage door that goes to an outside space onto a stage, and you realize how bright the daylight actually is,
right.
And the insight to come from that is that we really never can deliver real sunlight on stage. We just can't do it, and yet our eyes in the real world process that information all the time.
Yeah.
But on stage, we don't have that much electricity to equal the bright sun on an afternoon day. So color, all the time, the color stands in for luminance. And we use dominant colors to do the work when we can't deliver the amount of light that we want. And I do this in painting. Everybody does this in painting, where you use a warm color to stand in for brightness. And so it works the other way around too. That brightness can stand in for color. They're totally related.
Yeah, I was thinking, we have a dance studio, and I know that you've done a lot of dance, and I want to hear you talk about that. We have a dance studio that has west-facing curtain wall, and then some high clear story windows, and we have shades on them that are motorized, and I've set them up so they're DMX controlled. And I have, at certain times of the day, if you raise the shades, you get these beautiful slices of light into the dance studio. And I thought, boy, if I was designing in there, I would love to use daylight as a source in the dance studio. But no one's done that yet. It's just a dream of mine.
Oh, I'm surprised nobody's done it. Do you not do concerts during the day?
Well, there are a lot of thunderstorms in Florida too.
We do. We do have amazing thunderstorms, including recently. But I think, and in fact, we can map that space. My students have built the space in 3D, and they have built the window shades, and we know the longitude and latitude, so we can predict the sunlight. I think it will be a great project. And when I talk to students, I think, yeah, that would be cool, but no one's done it as of yet.
Merce, I'm going to mangle the quote, but Merce very famously talks about that the lighting should be like the weather.
Yeah.
That the lighting cues are not tied to the dance, but let's pretend we're dancing outside and a cloud passes by.
Yes.
And that's the light cue.
I love it.
So it's okay if a thunderstorm comes by when the shades are up.
It is.
That's cool. Hey, you mentioned something, Clifton, about how color sometimes takes the place of the actual intensity of the natural light. Is that how you explain, or anyone could explain, why you would use blue as a color of nighttime? Moonlight blue and stupid colors like that, which are good colors. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of young designers think, well, it says moonlight blue, so therefore it must be the color of moonlight.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why we would reach to that. I mean, I talk about in my color lectures, when you give kids a box of crayons and ask them to draw something, it's so instructive to see what their hand reaches for, which color they reach for.
Yeah.
And they naturally would just draw the sun as yellow, even though we know technically the sunlight is not yellow, but that's what you do, and that's what a human does. And I think that the linkage between color and brightness are hardwired into our visual systems.
Hardwired, exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, David, why don't we go to that question? Because
no. Actually, I'm doing a Nancy Pelosi, and I'm tearing up this.
Oh my gosh!
Because now there's something else I want to talk about. Were you a fan, Clifton, of Game of Thrones?
I was. I actually read the books before the.
But you saw the shows, right?
I did see the shows, and my only problem with the shows was how violent they were. But
yeah, they're very violent.
But they were beautifully shot.
Exactly, and that's what I want to talk about, because the DPs and the cinematographers talked a lot about this term called Expressionistic Naturalism, which is what they used for the lighting.
It sounds so West Coast to me.
Well, of course, it's West Coast. It's West Coast of Australia and of Iceland and other places they're at. But you think about Expressionistic Naturalism. It's like oxymoron, right? In a way.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
not really, because they were
really.
talking about using a lot of natural light in their shots, but pushed for a much more expressionistic feeling. And they used color, sort of a way that we use it in theater. A lot of their shots in the Castle Black had the nighttime shots had light coming through the windows that was basically blue. I mean, really a strong blue. Steel blue, which is something you see in the theater a lot. That's our sort of moonlight blue look, but only to contrast with the warm, natural candlelight that they shot the scenes under. So, it's interesting because a lot of my students don't even realize that moonlight is not that color, especially in those scenes, because they were talking about how natural it looked, that the moonlight was the right color. And I find that really fascinating that a lot of people, because of what's happening in the art, are now being sort of misdirected in their understanding of what natural color is. Do you have any comments about that?
Well, I just think we should all spend more time outside.
Yeah, right.
Because
Exactly.
the antidote to all of this is to go out and experience candlelight and moonlight and to really look at it deeply. And I mean, it's another reason why I like to paint, is that you're looking at it deeply and figuring out, hey, what is that color?
Yeah, I love your point about looking at it deeply. For me, I don't paint or draw, but I'm going to do that in retirement. But I do photography, and like anything else, like you said, and I also do all this work with miniature optics and fiber optic and that kind of thing. And I think there's something to be said that when you put something under a microscope and you study it closely, like you're saying, study it deeply, you get to understand it better and really see it. Right. So our subject is light. So, yeah, it's all about really looking closely at it and how it behaves. And the other thing, maybe, Clifton, could you talk a little bit about the relativity of color? And I know you talk about it in your book, and I'm a big fan of Joseph Albers, right, and the interaction of color.
Me too, yeah. Well, to bring this back a little bit more to what we do professionally, I was so excited when the LED luminaires came out and being able to get at the emitters directly. So I'm a huge fan of direct mode.
Me too.
I don't
the only way.
I don't want any other mode, and I don't care if it uses more channels or whatever, but
right.
I have to have direct. I have to be able to say, can we just push the cyan emitter up a little bit, and can we take the indigo one down? And,
Yeah.
So I want to be able to feel the components of the color directly. And that's, to me, is the closest thing to painting, is to construct those colors by hand. But to get to your question about relativity, I would just say that our brain, the way we perceive everything, the whole vision system, is a series of calculations that our brain is doing. And we don't realize it's calculating, but it is. And so it's always looking at every single thing that your eyes see and trying to construct some coherence from it. And so it does all sorts of relative calculations that make it possible for us to move through the world with continuity. And it's because of that set of calculations, every single thing that we see is relative. And the trick to all of our work is to say, what is this color, not the whole plane of that color, but what does this color mean when it's next to this color?
Right.
And we're looking always at what's the difference in this moment of the scene? And a moment, I mean a spatial moment, and the one that's right next to it. And is that plausible for an audience? That equals, we're saying, oh, that's the light from that table lamp hitting the molding in a certain way. And the way we analyze the truth of that is by looking at how the molding makes the corner. And so we're always doing this kind of relative thing.
Can't we say that, though, about all of our senses? That everything that we see and analyze in life has to do with relativity and contrast.
I think that's true. I do think that recent research, and I'm not a sound designer, as we all know from the whole horrible setup situation of this podcast. So I'm not a sound designer, but recent research that I've read says that there are limits to your hearing, and there are lifetime limits to how much loud noise you can handle over a lifetime. And what I've been reading recently is that, there's kind of, if you hear a lot of loud noises, you only get so much of that in your life because there's damage every time. So I do think that the kind of limiting ranges, of course, everything in our perception of the world is relative. So yes, I agree with you. But I do think there are limits in some senses. Yeah. I was working in Indonesia, and I went to go see a show in Yogyakarta that I wasn't involved in, but I wanted to see what, the local people were doing to put on a contemporary theater show. And I was so shocked because the colors that they were using were not, to me, they seemed like German expressionist painting colors. They were so garish. There was this kind of acidic green put against this yellow, and then there'd be this red uplight. And it was fascinating. And they were doing realistic little plays. And I asked the lighting designer after the show what brought him to those choices. And he said, well, it's just natural. Those are the colors of the world.
Right.
And it was amazing to me because it's not how I see the world, but it's how he sees the world. And I thought I learned such a lesson about culture and color there, and also just about, kind of deep seeing of color and so many things wrapped up in that. Like how we see color is different.
You're talking about color and LEDs, and you talked about your direct control, which I totally agree with too. I do the same. How do you compensate for the lack of red wavelengths in LEDs when you're lighting a show?
ETC has dropped some stuff on the web about the deep color red. So there is a bunch of really important wavelengths, as important as lime and indigo, but on the other side of the spectrum that have been missing from kind of our LED experience, and missing from not just ETC equipment. The ETC equipment, in my opinion, does the best color rendering, but missing from everyone's equipment. It's this kind of near infrared stuff. So
R9, yep.
Yeah, the RO9 question, right?
Right, R9, yep.
So how do you compensate now using what we have and what, unfortunately, is a price competitive sort of business? A lot of people are forced to use inferior LEDs.
Sure.
I just want to say that it's a big issue because, and I just did this big musical in Europe, and I needed a really good, strong color rendering in the pinks for a particular scene, and I was using state-of-the-art equipment by a major manufacturer, and it wasn't ETC. These are moving lights, and I basically ended up hanging a bunch of PC, 2K tungsten PCs, because I just could never get as good of a color rendering as I needed. So how in an LED world right now do we compensate?
Well, I've argued from the beginning of this LED revolution that this equipment should be an and for us. This should be another tool in our box. It shouldn't be thought of as a replacement. However, economics are dictating that it's going to be a replacement.
Right.
So I think it's upon all of us to kind of demand better color rendering and to be sensitive to it, and to also have the language to speak about it with accuracy and with knowledge about why something isn't working.
We've had issues with the R9 or the red question with ETC products in direct mode, looking at a color checker card and saying, hey, look, the red's dead. Sometimes just by tweaking just the red emitter 2%, poop, all of a sudden, there it is. So I think it's a question of just manipulating that stuff. Yes, you've got to have the good stuff in the engine in the first place, but then also learning how to play that symphony where we play more than one attribute now for color. It's not just intensity and a gel, and that's the shift for some of us from our generation. And I think our students sometimes, I'll just point my finger at the color picker and boom, there I have what I want. And I'm like, they're not looking deeply at it, right? So it's sort of, they have to become more sophisticated. And I've heard clients say, oh, we don't want to spend money on an expert. Can't we just get this out of the box? And I'm like, nope, you're going to need an expert. You're gonna need eyes and people who understand it.
One thing that's happening, I think, with the performing arts centers changing over to LEDs is it's pushing the need for experts into the people who are touring shows now. Because, someone rolls in to do not a first-class Broadway show, but, maybe a third-tier city or a dance show that's coming in or a community concert. All those people who are now managing those shows have to be able to look at the equipment and get the intended color out of it, pretty quickly. And it's a hard job to do now. It's harder than it was before.
From an economic standpoint, it's sort of a good thing. Remember when they said, "Oh, we'll never have moving lights in the theater. It's too complicated. How are we going to train the stagehands? And we'll lose workers. We won't have as many jobs." In fact, the opposite happened, right?
Yes.
The fear, right? We have more people with better training doing more work than ever. And I think the same will happen with color. And it's good for educators so that we will help educate these folks. And then I think it all the boats rise from these things. The fear of, it's just more work. Turns out to be good in the long run, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, Clifton, you are one of John Gleason's students, and listeners of the show know that I had the fortunate experience of interning with John for one show at the Dallas Opera. And John spoke a lot about color. I mean, he taught me more about color in 20 minutes than I ever learned in 7 years of college. So how do you feel about his red-green theory and relativity of color?
Well, the book is dedicated to John. So much of the material from the book comes from my schooling with him. I feel very lucky to have been at NYU when he was there. He was the first person that I encountered that had thought about color deeply. And, for John, I think the biggest gift that he gave me that I could bring forward is a way to talk about color with our colleagues that's in ways that are actionable. Because I want us to have conversations at the tech table or beforehand about color that lead me to a solution as a lighting designer. And I think that was John's gift to all of us.
Could you give an example, Clifton, of a tech table conversation where the color conversation was deep and meaningful and actionable? I would love to hear that.
It's rare, but
I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but
yeah.
That would be. I mean, if you think about it first, take a break. If you think about a conversation where, wow, we really zoned in on something useful there, that would really be cool.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of a story that I could tell you at this moment that would illustrate this. But to me, if we get to the place where we can all agree on what saturation means, what hue means, what intensity means, and use those words correctly to each other as collaborative artists, I think that would go a long way.
Oh, yeah, I do. In fact, what I do now with my students is I use, and I stole this idea from Scott Rosenfeld, who's my colleague at Smithsonian. If you open either Lightroom or other sophisticated photo editing software, it uses those, for the most part, those terms are correct. Luminance, brightness, right? Temperature, Kelvin, hue, saturation. I mean, they're right there. And I've been doing that with the student right now, like just looking at photos and just seeing what happens when we change those dials and use those words. And yeah, agreed with you about universal language really helps.
Yes. I think that whenever we're looking at a color, we should be able to say, to manipulate its hue, we should be able to say we should push it towards warm or towards cool, towards pink or towards green. And if we could just use those 4 words to move hue around, boy, that would be, I would love that if everyone got to that point.
Well, isn't that right? I mean, if you're in a color space, whichever one you choose, if it's the CIE color space, if you're moving across the black body curve, you're moving between yellow and blue. And if you're moving on the U prime, V prime, you're moving towards either magenta or green. That's I got a lot of this from studying architectural lighting, where they really think about it. And museums, where they kind of use those terms pretty a certain amount of precision. Mm-hmm. We're going to turn it back to the book, because I think what Clifton did for me as a teacher is that I didn't really have a good book on this stuff. And I stumbled into, again, thanks to Scott, this vision and art book by Livingstone, which I've been using in class. And then Clifton comes along and brings us this wonderful book on color that is sort of a lot of the same information, but not geared towards fine artists, but geared towards theatrical people. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why you felt the need to do that and what the experience was like. Because I think that's going to help the next generation, well, people with less experiences, to really read Clifton's book. I do want to plug it shamelessly here.
Oh, thank you. I think everyone should read the book, yeah.
and Clifton, how does one get their hands on your book?
Oh, the best thing is to buy it directly from the publisher, which is, the website is SilmanJames.com, I think is what it is.
Silman James Press, I think. Yeah, Silman James Press.
Yeah. But you can also buy it on Amazon. It's available as an ebook, so you can get it on Apple or Amazon.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's better to get the book in your hand because they did a really good job with the quality. The color quality, I think, is good. And I like having books in my hand, but either way, it's fine. And the book is built around a kind of idea of a semester-long class. So at the end of each chapter, there's exercises to do as homework. So it's really set up for classroom use as well as individuals reading it, with the aid of a light lab and setting up things to see for yourself how it works.
That's very powerful. Those experiments that you have in there are wonderful, and I have yet to implement them in my program, but that's the plan.
Great. Yeah, I'm teaching a class this semester that's built around the book. So
nice.
Probably an addition to will come out of learning that those exercises could be tweaked or something, but I hope that's all good.
What inspired you, Clifton, to get into teaching, and how are you liking it, and how does it feel, and why now?
Yeah, so why now? I guess the specific timing is that my husband left an idea of full-time employment and has been moving into a consulting role.
Nice.
And so it allowed us to contemplate for the first time leaving New York for a bit and having a different experience. And I've been thinking about teaching for a long time, and I've been, I lecture around and I have done short courses with people. And I really thought, boy, I've kind of amassed a set of knowledge especially about working outside the U.S. I think that is a little bit unique maybe not unique, but more rare for U.S. designers. And somehow I should figure out a way to give that back.
And how are you liking it? Are you liking School of the Arts? Do you feel like you're fitting into the academic environment?
Yeah, I love the students so much. I'm blessed by having been handed a program that is firing on all cylinders by Norman Coates.
Right.
He left me such a great program. And, I have Josh Sealander and Eric Rimes, who are both also continuing their professional careers. And so the three of us have the department, and it's already successful. So there was no triage to do. So in that way,
nice.
I'm very lucky, because I think other situations would not have been so great to walk into.
Yeah, you have firm foundation to work from. That's great.
Yeah.
So Clifton, allow three, I'm speaking for Steve now, three designers who turned into this weird academic world a little bit of advice. And I'm just going to give you one little bit of advice that will save your life and save your soul in academia. And that is never, ever, ever accept any type of chairmanship or anything else in the bureaucracy. That
we all three avoided it. It's true.
Bloodthirsty bureaucracy of
so good.
Of that. So just keep doing what you're doing, and you'll focus on the students, which you love, and we all love. And that's the only thing that will save your soul in academia. Say
That's
no.
fantastic advice.
Just say no, my friend. It's easy to say.
So Norman ran the department. My predecessor ran the department, and when they contemplated replacing him, I think they very kindly said, "Well, a new person coming in, it's going to be too much of a burden to take over all the design classes and run the department. So Eric Rhymes took over the running of the department, and I'm so grateful that they had that insight because there was no way I could have stepped into that. So
all I can say is that your time will come. They will ask you eventually. You will be asked, and all you have to say is no, thank you.
Yeah, cool.
To take our advice. Speaking of advice, what advice would you offer our young listeners? Because like I said before, a lot of our listeners are just getting into lighting design.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best advice for any person going into an artistic idea of their life is to be as well-rounded as possible. Learn how to bake bread, learn how to paint, learn other things besides how WYSIWYG works. And there's room in your brain for more than lighting, and it will make you a better lighting designer. If the more you know about the rest of the world, about the politics, about the culture, about mathematics, about everything, be a Renaissance
girl.
person. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
Those make the
Totally
best
agree.
designers. I think about Don Holder starting out life wanting to be a forestry person.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And
I wanted to be a farmer.
Yeah, and those things, I think Don is a great lighting designer. But he's partly a great lighting designer because he has a life outside of this. And
Right.
he's the hardest working person I know, but he also, has this great life outside. So
That's wonderful. That's great advice to end the show with. And I just want to thank you for writing this book, because it's something that a lot of us, who had the pleasure and honor and luck to had John touch our lives, have learned. And it's great that that someone has finally put this down in words with also your great experience from your wonderful career. So it's required reading in my classes now, and I'm sure it sits in Stan's and probably Steve's as well.
Sits on my desk where my students sit, all the great books. Yep.
that's awesome. Yeah, I hope to continue John's legacy. Yeah.
You are, and thank you for doing that, for the people
Thanks
who
for
knew
finding
John.
the time for us today, also in working on all the sound issues too, and the help with me kind of coordinating that better.
Yeah,
that's
thank you for
wonderful.
getting Stan to finally write those facts.
That's right.
You totally shamed him into it. It was wonderful. I loved it.
You did, and I accepted it graciously.
No, it's good. Just, I don't know nothing about sound, so.
Well, neither do we, obviously.
Neither did we when we started.
Well, the rockin' sounds of the luminoids in the background tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, LiveDesignOnline.com, Pandora, and just about every other podcast site out there. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you won't miss 1 second of crazy Lumen insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast, except Clifton's, which are fine. However, if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Flecht, Flock, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and this week from New York City. And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss even more crazy stuff in the lighting world.
All that and a new sponsor, Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Thanks a lot, Clifton, and bye-bye from Light Talk.
Thank you, Clifton, and bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.